Good morning and welcome to the class today for your spirituality class. We're going to look at the story from the Gospels. It's found in all three Gospels, but we'll be reading it from Luke today, and it's called the Transfiguration. Uh, Transfiguration Sunday is this coming Sunday, and in this coming week, the season of Lent begins. And so this is a text that leads us into that period of time. So let's start with the text. It's from Luke chapter 9, and it's verses 28 through 36. And I'll read that for you now. About 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John, and James with him up onto a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flashing light. Two men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men standing with him. As the men were leaving Jesus, Peter said to him, Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up three shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He didn't know what he was saying. And while he was speaking, a cloud appeared and covered them, and they were afraid, and they entered the cloud, or they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, This is my son, whom I have chosen. Listen to him. When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept them to themselves and did not tell anyone at the time what they had seen. And then Jesus leads them down the mountain. So, uh, my question is this. Have you ever had a moment where you thought you had things figured out, where you finally felt stable and secure, or like you were on the right path, and then only to have it shift underneath you, have life shift on you again? Excuse me. Maybe it was a time when things seemed to be coming together, only for someone or something unexpected to happen. Maybe you had a moment where you felt safe, like you could breathe, and then suddenly the situation changed. It's kind of frustrating when that happens. And we long for stability. We really want things to make sense. And we want to get even a little bit of clarity sometimes about things that are going on in our life. And when we find that, we want to try and hold on to it. We want to make those stable moments last. That's exactly what happens in the story of Jesus taking his three disciples, Peter, James, and John, up on the mountain. And like the story said, while they're there, something completely unexpected happens. Jesus is transfigured before them. His appearance changes, his clothes shine, and then suddenly they see him in a way that they've never seen him before. They see him in what is really his true self. And Peter, who is always ready to react and jump in quickly, even when he doesn't know what he's doing, he comes up with a plan. He says, Lord, it's good for us to be here. Let me build three shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. You see, Peter wants to hold on to that moment. He wants to build something permanent, a place that they can always come to, something that's permanent so they don't have to leave that moment to try and capture it and to hold it down and make it stable. Because down the mountain, life is not always that certain. There are challenges, and he doesn't want to face all of that again. All of a sudden, here is clarity about who and what Jesus is about, he thinks, and he wants to hang on to it. But before he can do anything, the moment fades and that vision disappears. And Jesus leads them back down into the real world where, let's face it, things are messy and complicated and they're not always that clear. Peter's response is so human. In the face of something extraordinary, in the face of this amazing thing, he reaches for something practical, a construction project. When we experience moments of clarity and joy, when we find that stability, we often try and do the same thing. We want to sort of freeze time and keep things exactly the way they are and in that perfect moment. It's a natural impulse. It's something that we want to do. But unfortunately, life and growth doesn't happen when we stay in our comfort zones. When we're just in those places and situations where we're comfortable and we don't allow life to bring anything new to us, we simply don't grow. The disciples couldn't remain on the mountain. They couldn't stay there forever. Jesus still had work for them to do and work for himself to do for people who were hurting and who were in need. The purpose of that mountaintop experience wasn't to stay there and stay in that moment. It was a moment that was meant to strengthen them for what would come next. Change is one of the only things that we can count on in life. Sometimes it comes gently and gradually. Other times it kind of crashes in on us like a wave that wipes us out on the beach and rearranges everything and knocks over our sandcastle. Sometimes we lose jobs, relationships change, people that are friends have to move away, and or sometimes we just find ourselves wishing that we could be able to keep things the same or return to times that were more certain for us. What's hopeful about this story, because when we think about that change, it's kind of scary, I guess. But what this story does, the hope that it brings, is that Jesus doesn't leave the disciples to figure it out alone. He came down the mountain with them and he guided them, even when they didn't really understand what was going to happen next. When life moves forward before we feel ready, the question becomes what helps us stay grounded? What helps us be able to move forward and take the new experiences that we've gained in that stability forward into the rest of our lives? First, we can find some small anchors of stability. There are things that we can always take with us. It might be our faith. It might be the morning routine. It might be a simple practice like deep breathing or journaling. I heard one time, I think when I was young, that somebody suggested to put a small stone in my pocket. And when I felt overwhelmed, I could reach in my pocket and grab the stone in my pocket and take a few deep breaths. It was just a way to remind myself to return into the present moment and to that, things are not always going to be at sea. So we can find those things and hold on to those skills that we learn that help us get through those moments of change. Another thing we can do is recognize our own resilience, that strength that we've built up. I mean, think about a time when you faced something that was difficult. You had things that helped you through that, things that you learned. You navigated challenges before that, and you've navigated challenges since. And when challenges come again, each of the experience we've had before, of those experiences that we've had before, they've taught us something about our resilience, our capacity to adapt and to grow. Finally, I think what we can do is we can accept that moving forward is necessary for us to grow. Peter wanted to stay on the mountain, but Jesus led them down the mountain and forward into life. We don't always get to remain in comfortable places, but we do carry what we've learned into the next part of our journey. The disciples came down changed by what they'd witnessed. They couldn't stay in that moment, but they could carry that light, that hopefulness that they found in it with them. In the same way, we can carry our own experiences and we carry them forward with us. They shape us and they prepare us for what life is going to bring to us next. And remember, you're not alone in facing challenges. Others have walked those kind of paths before and found their way forward, just as you have. There are people who walk with us sometimes. There are people who help us through those helpers that we gather into our lives. Excuse me. And even when the path ahead isn't completely clear, you do, I believe, have the strength to take the next step. I mean, often life is just putting one foot in front of the other and just meeting each situation as it comes. maybe that's what the disciples learned. I think, or at least that's what I think they learned. It wasn't about holding on to the moment of clarity, but about recognizing the divine presence that goes with them everywhere they go. However, you understand that kind of presence or ability in your life, whether it's through community or through faith or through just your inner strength and experience or the people that you gather around you on the journey, it, it will give you courage as you face the challenges that come ahead. You see, sometimes the most valuable experiences aren't the ones that we can hold on to, but the ones that transform us, that change us, and that help us move forward. Thanks very much for listening. I hope you have a great rest of the day and rest of the week. And I'll talk to you again next week.